The Combi Melta is a currently available heroic bolt rifle, a combination of the classic bolt rifle and the brutal Melta Gun, and a versatile primary for your tactical class. If you pace your shots, it can deal with distant targets fairly well, but it shines best in dealing with medium range targets and clearing small hordes, or staggering and incinerating multiple larger targets with its overmounted Melta Gun. You can get the biggest and most consistent bang for your buck with the Combi Melta by following a certain combat formula, which will give you a few fairly consistent damage boosts to help this already effective weapon really shine. Your generally ideal combat flow to get the most out of this setup should be something like this. 1. If the target was silly enough to get in melee with you, parry them. This will proc priority targeting, battle focus, and concentrated fire, giving you a 170% damage boost against them and usually opening them up for a gun strike. Next, of course, gun strike them. For that little window right after a parry, the enemy will already take a chunk of damage from your gun strike, but this will also proc your relentless pursuit, giving you an additional 25% damage for your ranged weapons against all targets. So with your now 195% damage boost against them, you can unleash your Melta shot, which will almost certainly either completely incinerate them or ready them for an execution or another gun strike. Kill the target, regen a clip of ammo and that one Melta shot from our Emperor's Judgment, and repeat. Use what remains of your damage boost to engage the next enemy, be they ranged or melee, and continue the loop. 2. If they're a ranged target or a group of ranged targets and they're giving you trouble, you can use your Auspex scan to quickly mark and honestly annihilate them with your bolter function. You get 90 seconds of free kills if anything tries to call for help via signal jammer, and after that 90 seconds has ended, your Auspex will be nearly recharged. This combat cycle gives you use of a few devastating tools when enemies decide to get in your space, as well as counter enemies trying to pepper you with fire from afar, and it isn't shy about dealing with any sort of enemy that the game might throw at you. Best of all, it actually doesn't demand that you do anything special to get the benefits. Utilize your weapon and the tools at your disposal when it seems appropriate. That's all. It takes a little learning to get the battle sense down for it, when to use your Melta shots and when to take and not take a gun strike, but it's a worthy investment to get the most out of an all-around fun weapon. The same can be said for most Terminus targets. They'll all give you opportunities to either land that perfect parry or will happily sit in your scan zone for the few seconds it takes for you and your team to just plain gun them down. Next, we'll of course want to look at a build that suits our weapon for the class we're using the Combi Melta on, which is of course tactical. For our first core perk, the only one on this tree that happens to benefit us here will be Balanced Distribution, which will give our Combi Melta its first little boost in effectiveness in exchange for a 10% reduction in the strength of our secondary weapon. For the sake of this build, we will be taking advantage of gun strikes frequently, but their damage won't be affected by this perk, and your Combi Melta has the tools to deal with more distant targets that we might usually rely on our sidearm for if we were using a regular Melta gun, so we can safely accept that small damage reduction as a non-issue. For our second core perk, we'll be utilizing Relentless Pursuit. As I mentioned before, this setup will emphasize gun strikes as an important part of your combat flow. This perk has no cooldown, meaning as long as you're in a position to get them, you should be able to get an extra 25% out of both firing modes on your Combi Melta for most of a given conflict. For your third perk, honestly any of these is a good option for the right circumstances, but the one that will give you the most consistent value is Emperor's Vengeance. This will of course give you a full magazine back for your Combi Melta every time you kill a major or higher enemy, with 30-second cooldown, but also give you one shot back for your overmounted Melta every time the perk procs. It doesn't seem like much, but this could proc 4 or 5 times in an encounter even with the cooldown. And one of the most important aspects of it is that it doesn't matter how you kill the enemy to activate it. If the gun strike kills him, excellent. You get your 1 bar of armor, a damage boost from our Relentless Pursuit, and ammo back. Need to execute him to get a moment to breathe? Excellent. Take that moment, take some ammo too. You throwing a crack grenade at the spore shooting car because you can't bear to look at him a second longer? Marvelous. More ammo for you. It gives us a measure of versatility that few other perks will, to help us have access to all of our kit as often as possible. For our team perk, for the sake of this build, I'll have to recommend Aligned Aim. It's another boost to your range damage that affects all the range damage you deal, as well as of course giving a decent boost to your teammates. I can't blame anyone for favoring Secure Stockpile, of course, but our Combi Melta with that little extra boost really starts to get over the hill and become a force to be feared. For this build on our first gear perk, I'll recommend Priority Targeting. This will of course increase the duration of your mark from Auspex scan by 8 seconds for a total duration of 16 seconds. In exchange, your Auspex scan active ability will no longer mark Minoris targets, but you rarely need all that extra damage to kill off a bunch of Gaunts or Zangors with your Combi Melta or your melee weapons. And even with its damage reduced, your sidearm will likely one-shot most Minoris enemies with a headshot. More importantly, this perk also affects the effectiveness of our next perk. That perk is, of course, Battle Focus. Every time we perfectly parry an enemy, or block, I don't judge, that enemy will receive a mark from Auspex scan for the full 16 seconds, which follows into our next and final gear perk perfectly. Concentrated Fire. This will buff the damage received by any marked enemy by an additional 120%, so 170% for most enemies, or 140% for Terminus targets, who usually only receive a 20% damage boost from Auspex scan. For the full 16-second duration on your parries, as an added bonus, your Auspex scan itself will last 60% longer, meaning if you can stick it on an enemy well, or to an enemy that's unlikely to move out of range quickly, such as a Zoanthrope or Neurothrope, you and your team should have a much easier time burning them down before they have a chance to escape. Lastly, I'll recommend Signal Jammer for your signature perk. Both Radiating Impact and Marked for Death can be incredibly fun and effective in their own right, but Signal Jammer has the unique ability to keep encounters manageable at multiple levels regardless of the difficulty you're playing on. This build encourages you to use your Auspex scan often, and not having to worry about reinforcements can make a huge impact. With this perk, anytime any enemy is marked by your Auspex scan, your active ability, you have a 90-second window. Keeping in mind Auspex scan's base cooldown is only 120 seconds, where if any enemy even tries to call for help, they'll just straight up explode. It can not only stop the encounter from getting any worse, but also net you a few free kills from enemies that ran off to try to call for help. Now, onto the Combi Melta itself, we have a few ways we can boost the overall effectiveness of our weapon from its own perk tree. Mostly increasing the effectiveness of our bolter, but with a few special perks increasing the effectiveness of both our bolter and our Melta. Starting out, we'll take Headhunter to continue to boost our effectiveness against distant targets with our bolter fire. We've got close-up targets perfectly handled. We'll continue the natural course onto Adamant Hunter to give us yet more clearance to rapidly take care of snipers, zoanthropes, and other headshot-worthy targets when the chips are down. Naturally, we'll continue on to Fast Reload, which will lead us to Able Reload, and more importantly, to Recoupment. This is one of those perks that always helps in a pinch if you can keep it in mind, as it just gives you one more way of restoring armor, and a meager 15-second cooldown means you can theoretically take advantage of it several times in an encounter. We'll rotate down from there to Great Might to get another little boost towards the game's toughest enemies. And one of two especially important perks here, we'll take Increased Capacity, which will not only buff the reserves for our bolter, but for our overmounted Melta as well. Then we'll move on to Cleaving Fire, giving us a little bit of damage and stagger potential to wear down enemies with their guard up as they advance. And more importantly, the other of the two really important perks here, Rampage. It's another way in combat to give your Combi Melta more punch, and in the right scenarios it can help you utterly annihilate heavier targets if you take a moment to wipe out some of the adds they have underfoot. Next, the natural course leads us to Extended Magazine, then on to another Headhunter, and finally Divine Might, boosting our headshot damage by 10% and our overall damage by another 10%. With those perks slotted and our combat flow in mind, we're ready to take on just about anything the game can throw at us with our Combi Melta. And if you were looking for a way to make your Combi Melta feel as fun and effective as it can be, I hope you feel like you found it. Thanks all for watching, and I hope you have as much fun with this as I have.